really isn't being addressed at the national level by our the leaders who are helping guide society through this pandemic. Is the value and the magnitude of those resilience factors in turning and shifting this pandemic in a more positive direction. And we get to that. We get our resilience through how we take care of ourselves. It has to do with nutritious food, and getting good sleep, and just taking care of ourselves in all the multitude of ways that we know how to do that makes us stronger and have more energy and the capacity to be adaptable in the face of challenge.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Eat Real to Heal podcast, where I am your host, Nicolette Richer, and I created this podcast so we can bring healing hero stories of people that have used food as medicine to reverse their chronic degenerative diseases to light. We wanted the world to know about those stories. And of course, being a science nerd buff that I am, I also like having medical doctors, healthcare practitioners, scientists, and others on our show to talk about different healing modalities and the science that exists behind those. And so it is with great pleasure that today I get to welcome Dr. Karyn Shanks from Iowa in the United States. She is an internal medicine and functional medicine doctor who's been practicing for over 25 years. And she was able to overcome her chronic illness that really left her fellow doctors feeling like that she was just a broken human being. Instead of looking at her as an individual that had a chronic conditions that really could be treated and fixed with the right protocols, with the right methods and treatments. And she in turn had to find that for herself, which led her down this incredible path to where she is now, where she helps her patients overcome chronic degenerative diseases when other doctors are not able to do so. They will often refer their tough cases to Karyn. So it is really a true honor to have her on the show, because in this interview that we do together that's coming up, I really just fall in love with this woman. She has now become one of my, top 10 favorite people. Other people in that category are Dr. Gemma Newman from the UK. She's the plant-based medicine doctor in the UK. Listen to the podcast that we did together and you'll know why she's in my top 10 favorite humans. There's times when I get to meet these interviewees that I, get to have on the show, and it really is just an immediate connection. It's where I feel like I've known them my whole life. I feel like we have been living similar paths, walking a similar line of self-discovery, of knowledge discovery, of science, attunement and attainment. And Karyn is one of those people. Other humans on the planet that I feel really strongly about are Dr. Ranjan Chatterjee from the UK as well. Listen to his podcast on the Rich Roll Show. And another doctor that I just have I feel like a very heartfelt connection with, even though I don't know them, is Dr. Kim Williams. He's a cardiologist out of the States who is just, so incredibly, his story is so profound as to how he arrived at understanding that food is medicine as well. And again, humans that have walked a similar journey, we tend to be able to relate with, because our stories are similar and we go, I can resonate with what you had to go through. And even though, these are medical doctors that went on this journey, I mean, their journeys are still the same. It's shifting of worldviews. It's the questioning the systems that are in place that we've been taught, but then we eventually, for some reason, we come across a little hurdle or a little bump in the road that actually causes us to pause, to stop, to reflect and say, hey, everything that I've come to know to date is not resonating with me. why is that? And then there's a slight pivot. It's like, I can't continue to go down this road, the road that I was raised on, the road that, I was indoctrinated onto. And instead, there's a pivot that takes place, and all of a sudden, you find yourself walking another path where you're questioning everything that you've come to know to date. And it leaves you feeling um, a little bit lost, a little bit out of control. It can leave you feeling scared, shaken up. It makes you feel almost alien, where you feel you've just stepped onto the planet and everybody's looking at you like, what the hell's wrong with you? Like, everybody knows that when you have a migraine, you take Tylenol. Everybody knows that when you have diabetes, you take insulin. Everybody knows that you have to eat meat because meat has protein. And you're the only one standing there saying, well, actually, no, I actually read that vegetables also have amino acids that get converted into protein in the body. Or you're left, thinking like, well, is it a good idea to take Tylenol or Advil or, some other kind of drug to suppress a fever? I actually have read that when you don't suppress fevers, that you can actually let them run the course and you can heal from the virus or whatever else is causing the fever faster, and you allow your body to do the work. And when you say things like that out loud, other people can look at you and say, are you on crack? Like, are you crazy? And of course, you're left really feeling vulnerable. You're left feeling exposed. You're left feeling like you're crazy sometimes. And I know that the reason why all of these people, and now Dr. Karyn Shanks, is on this, it feels like they're one of my tribe, or I'm one of their tribe, or there's a connection there, is because I know that they've walked that path as well, where they've questioned the system and they've been in a place where they've had to stand alone and they've had to walk the path alone until they eventually found others, and found others who felt like them. So everything we do in life, humans, we love being part of a tribe, we love being part of a community, but sometimes the path to get to that community is very lonely. So for myself, I don't know, that's why I have feel, just from one interview, spending 90 minutes with another human being, why I feel so close to this person, whether it's intellectually, it's actually emotionally as well. I mean, I have such deep love for the work that she's doing, even though I just discovered Dr. Karyn Shanks recently, but have such profound work for the love for the work that she's doing with her patients, is because people like Dr. Gemma Newman, Dr. Karyn Shanks, Dr. Kim Williams, Neil Bernard, Joel Furman, Dr. Clapper, Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn and Rip Esselstyn, all of these humans on the planet they're providing hope. They're providing space for opportunity to emerge. And that opportunity is health for people who didn't previously have any health, where they've been debilitated by their illnesses and their disease. They provide space and hope for in the world of academia, so that we can shift and pivot and say, hey, are those practices of bloodletting that were appropriate, a century ago, not even a century ago, well, those are no longer valid now. So could potentially this practice of factory farming and animal husbandry and conventional farming practices with pesticides, could those be the equivalent of bloodletting and teeth pulling, and maybe even, are they equivalent of burning witches at the stake, or burning people who stood up against government and parliament and different things that they believed in? So are we currently in that system right now where we are rising up against old beliefs that are no longer working for us, and we're switching over to new belief systems that can actually bring sustainability to the planet, that can bring healing to the animals, that can stop species from going extinct, like literally every 20 minutes right now? um, this is really what the hope that Karyn Dr. Karyn Shanks and all of these other, favorite people of mine have brought, it's that there is an opportunity right now, today, that we can turn things around and we can actually make our health better. We can make the health of our families better. We can make the health of our communities and our planet just better overall. And so, without saying much more, I want to welcome Dr. Karyn Shanks. Like I said, she's an internal medicine and functional medicine MD who's been practicing for 25 years. She's board certified. She has her practice now, which you're going to learn, which is fundamentally different than the current state of our medical system, where you probably know, where you go in for a doctor's appointment, spend like maybe half an hour to an hour waiting for a 7.5 minute appointment with your doctor, to only have them say, well, take these medications and come back in 2 weeks if it doesn't work and if you're not feeling better, or we don't know what to do with this condition that you have, this chronic condition that you have. And you just kind of get shuffled around the system, but you don't actually get treated, and you don't actually get a reversal of your chronic disease. And so her system, her practice is very different from that. So I hope you enjoy this interview. I know I enjoyed it immensely. I feel like I've gained a friend, and everybody, especially right now in a time of social distancing and isolation, it always feels good to meet somebody new, somebody that you connect with, that you resonate with, and somebody that at the end of the day you can call a friend. And immediately after this interview, I called my brother. I saw that he had called while I was doing the podcast, and I called him. And of course, he told me, he's had this chronic lung issue happening for a long time, and he's young. He should not have this happening, but he does. And again, he hasn't been able to get reprieve. No doctors have been able to help him. They've told him everything that one time they told him he might have cancer, lung cancer. Another time they told him that he actually did have pleural effusion around the lungs. He was in the hospital for it, but still, they just gave him medications and it kind of went away, but it's been lingering, it's been chronic, and nobody's been able to solve the situation. And immediately I told him, I'm like, you need to call up Dr. Karyn Shanks and have that 3 to 4 hour appointment with her, where I'm sure she spends hours on his files before even meeting with him. And then she's probably going to spend hours thinking about him afterwards, to really come up with a treatment plan and a lifestyle change that is going to actually get him the results in reversing this chronic lung condition that's happening. And so I hope that, everything that you take away from this podcast is something that you're going to actually apply. And also remember to share the podcast with others who might need to understand that there's another way of doing medicine in this current day and age. There's another way of being taken care of by our healthcare system right now. And Karyn really describes so eloquently what that system can look like and what it does look like, because she's actually living it. She's actually doing it. If you're a medical doctor or a healthcare practitioner or a coach, or anybody who's involved in the wellness and health world, you can learn a lot from this podcast as well. So please consider sharing it with your professors, with your mentors, with your coaches, with your medical doctors, and share this podcast with them so that they can learn that there is another way of really doing healthcare in 2020 and beyond. So thanks everyone for being here with us. Without further ado, let's jump into the show. See you at the end. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Eat Real to Heal show. I am your host, Nicolette Richet. And on today's episode, we have Dr. Karyn Shanks. And I'm so excited to have Karyn on the show for so many reasons we're about to dive into. But let me first welcome Karyn.
Thank you.
Such
an honor.
It's a pleasure to have you here. So Karyn, I want to, before we dive into, obviously we're going to touch on COVID. Just before we jumped in and started recording, we talked about the concept of building resiliency. So I want to dive into that as well. But
Mm-hmm.
I was going through your site, and as I was getting to know you and I was reading your book, which we're going to talk about your book as well, and even your new ebook that's out, that everybody can access on your website. I want to go back to the point where you were ill, because I want people to understand that even though you are an internal medicine and functional medicine doctor, that you went to med school, that you did all of this, you had your own healing journey and experience that you've lived through, and you know what it means to change your story and to heal, which is the name of your
Mm-hmm.
book, Heal.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us about that.
And in conventional terms, I wasn't ill. I was exhausted. I was burned out. I had migraine headaches. I had joint pain. I was sort of the walking wounded. But I wasn't considered to be ill. In fact, in my pursuit of my own healing initially, they didn't find anything wrong. But I went through this whole experience of crashing and burning in my early 30s and had to find my own answers. And so I turned to, and this was going on in parallel with my working with chronic complex patients for whom I had nothing to offer from my conventional training, save my empathy, and my willingness to learn, as they brought me articles and books and what have you, and helped set me on a path of learning more about what it takes for human beings to heal, which goes well beyond a diagnosis and finding the right drug or treatment protocol. And so through that exploration, I learned about nutrition, and I learned about how to use nutrition to heal and balance your biochemistry, and create energy and resolve inflammation, um, and um, and I learned about, as you mentioned in your introduction, about the healing story and the stories that we tell ourselves that can get in the way of healing. I had to reckon with a whole lot of stories on my own healing journey, both as a physician healer and also as a person who wanted to feel well. So yes, so that was an important part of like the early stages of setting myself up for where I am today and what I do today for myself and in my medical practice.
So, within that, there is so much that, I mean, we can have 5 podcasts, I believe,
Yeah.
just on what you just mentioned now. But the one part I want to jump into that you highlighted is that you said your patients were bringing you literature and books and articles and saying, read this. And I've, through my clients and the stories that they've told me about the physicians they work with, and a lot of the physicians that I've had the, pleasure of getting to know over the years, not all of them are, and actually I would say most of them are not receptive to their patients giving them articles. It's the kind of like and I've been
Correct.
told this when my daughter was really sick in the hospital, and I said, okay, well, have you run these tests? What about this? Could it be this? And the doctor's like, you Google too much. And that's the response that my clients
Right.
also get from their doctors. So why were you
Yes.
different in that? Like, why? Tell me more about yourself and what made you open to wanting to learn that. Like, is that just part of your nature,
That's
or?
like $1 million question, isn't it? And I think it's human nature to want to be certain, and especially, and the more complexity we're dealt with, and the more, especially um, when our survival is called into question, I think we want to fixate on being certain, and certainly in the institution of medicine, there's this thread that one runs through about having to be certain and having to reduce things down to their simplest form. So we want simple and certain, but that's just not how things are, right? So
Mhm.
and the hidden curriculum in medical training is that you've got to learn the dogma, and then you've got to pretend like you're all knowing, right, in the face of these, right? I mean, and that's, I think that's part of this idea of being a medical expert, is that you know the facts and there's nothing else. So, you know, that's a pretty strong criticism, I guess, about medical education, but it is in fact true. So it is hard for doctors to receive feedback or, you know, articles or suggestions for thinking about things in a different way from patients, because it's part of their training, right?
So what was the difference? Like, what was
the
that
difference
difference
for
with
me?
you? Yeah.
Humility, having gone through my own healing journey and not finding the answers from those experts and from this body of knowledge and wisdom that I had trained in, and it had no answers for me. And so it was just a huge paradigm, collapse and then shift into a new way of thinking. And so, I was grateful that they brought me that information, which led to, books and things that, had eye-opening, mind-bending revelations for me that really helped lead me on my journey of discovering a new way to think about healing and about being a person.
And for you as a medically trained doctor in the, traditional medical system as we know it, with the curriculum as it's designed, how was that to go through that worldview paradigm shifting change? Like, was it an existential, crisis sort of transition, or was, what was that like for you? Because you must have been having this experience of learning and discovering, questioning everything that you had already been taught, seeing it as well embedded within the context of what you had been taught, but then also still working in the medical system with your peers, who I'm sure if you were talking to them, I can just imagine the conversations, they would think like, Karyn, I think you've gone off your rocker a little bit.
I know. Yeah, I think there were times when I felt like I was in crisis. Like, who am I? What? I don't fit anymore. And what do I really think, and what do I really believe? And it took time for me to absorb new bodies of knowledge and wisdom, and gradually get comfortable with the idea that it's okay. In fact, it's not just okay, it's necessary that I question and I get curious and I look outside the framework of those narratives, those socially dominant narratives, and the narratives of conventional medicine, and just really deeply explore what else is out there. And it's taken years for me to get really comfortable with that I'm different. I see things in a different way. And even amongst my peers in what I consider to be more enlightened circles of healing and medicine, we have differences. And I think that's really about just evolving into a more mature mind, is just being able to evaluate things with fresh eyes, and be okay with having our own mind, and being willing to change, not getting too fixed, even in our newer ideas and what seem like more enlightened ideas. Is just being willing to not be fixed, to be able to have our eyes open anew every day to something.
As you're telling that story, it's I had this vision of you teaching this to other medical doctors, teaching this to medical students, especially because so many medical students go into the system wanting to support people and help people, and then at the end they're faced with people with exactly all the same symptoms that you were suffering from, the chronic fatigue and the hormonal imbalances, which I'm sure so many people come to you with, and everything else, and people not the doctor's not having an answer, not having a solution, and then saying things like, well, it's all in your mind, or saying things like, well, just try this or try this or try this or
Right.
try this. And then pretty soon,
Right.
like, they've tried everything, exhausted every measure, and the patient's not good.
Right.
And the reason why I'm really curious about how you transitioned into where you are now is because I work with medical doctors who are retired, and they will not come out of the closet, so to speak, of, because even though they've discovered that food is medicine, they've discovered, all of these other modalities, which can complement their existing knowledge, but they won't come out and say it because they are ridiculed by their peers, and they're not even practicing anymore, but they don't want to jeopardize their reputation.
And I understand that it's scary to stand apart, especially amongst physicians.
Mhm.
And I'm sure this is true for other other social groups, but physicians are very, very critical of anybody who thinks outside of the conventional wisdom. And it's very, very painful thing to go through.
Mhm.
Public criticism and humiliation and shame. So I understand that, but I think there are ways to come out that aren't combative, that are um, that are um, smoother and more acceptable. And I have to say that over through my own evolution as a physician, I really haven't received any like overt criticism or abuse from
Mhm.
other physicians. They're actually over the years have been grateful that I've been willing to take on their more complicated patients who they really don't enjoy working with and don't have solutions for. And they may
That's
think I'm
amazing.
weird, and I have an odd practice style, and but they send me their patients, so it's all good.
That's
you know?
amazing. Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. And, and I love Brene Brown's work on shame and resiliency. And, and
Yes,
you are,
me
I
too.
think, yeah, if Brene knew you, and she might, but if she knew you, I'm sure she would say you are, the epitome of who she's describing as, the people who need to stand up and be leaders in their field, and who
Right.
have to face potential even isolation to be able to just align with their values and their principles and keep moving forward with
Yes.
discovering those truths and then living those truths out, like as you do with your patients.
Right.
So I want to know, so what is it like for a patient to work with you who has one of these illnesses, or conditions, let's say? So we'll not even call it an illness because it's not,
Right.
termed
Right.
that within medical
Uh-huh.
terminology. So what happens when somebody comes with you and they have all of these underlying conditions that there's no potential solutions for from anybody
Right.
else?
Well, the first thing they get to do is tell their story, which doesn't happen in conventional medicine, where
Mhm.
they can get to tell their entire story is what you get. And I'm not about bashing conventional medicine,
No, not
because
at all.
it's brilliant at what it does well, right?
I
If you've got
agree.
an urgent illness, you've got a critical illness, you need emergency surgery. I had a retina tear last year. They did a brilliant job. That's where you want to go.
Yeah,
Okay, so it's
100%.
just, but I do think we're barking up the wrong tree when they ask them to do something different. And
Yeah.
but back to your question, which was what? I got off on a tangent. What
No,
was your
that's
what was
no.
your question?
And so I want to just rip off of what you just said too. And
Yes,
it is
yes,
so important what you just said, because of the fact that I think even for the patients, they think that if they go to somebody who, let's say, is a nutritionist or a medical doctor who also practices nutritional medicine, then even for, I know my clients, they think, well, I have to choose one or the other. And I want to let
right,
our audience know and our listeners know that it is not about that. It's about finding the solutions that work for you, right?
absolutely.
And that it's exactly what you said. If you're in a car accident, you need a full medical team
Yes,
all over your body working to
Yes.
make sure everything is working. When my daughter was diagnosed with meningitis, I needed a medical team to try and diagnose her
Yes.
because, nobody wanted to even say it was meningitis because she had been vaccinated for meningitis. And so they're like, well, it
Yes.
couldn't be that. Well, I needed a medical team. It wasn't going to be a nutritionist that was going to figure this out. Like, we needed
Correct.
a team. So it's so important for people to understand that it's not one or the other. It's
That
about
is right.
working through all of the information and then finding out what's right for you. So I just wanted to say that. Now let's go back to the question I asked you.
Absolutely. Okay.
So what does that look like? What does that look
Yes, that's
like to
right.
work with you? Like, so I want people to understand what that experience is like.
So the first thing they get to do is tell their story and in its entirety. And I help them with that by giving them extensive questionnaires with lots of questions so that we can come at their story in a variety of different ways, in ways they may not have thought of. So that by the time they're in the office with me, they have this enhanced understanding of themselves and their story and the whole chronological history of their story from birth to present time, because all the details are important.
Yeah.
And then they get to sit there in the chair across from me and tell this whole amazing story, and they're amazing to me. And it might take them a couple of hours to do that, you know.
Mhm.
Um, and so we, in between the storytelling and my questions and are coming up with an initial plan and some initial teaching, we might be together for 3 to 4 hours. And they also see my functional nutritionist. So the food plan is a core part of what everybody gets as part of their healing process, and kind of jump starting what we're trying to do.
Wow.
So that, in a nutshell, that's what it is. And I'd also say that in the story, 95% of the time, the answers are all there. So this isn't healing isn't rocket science. And a
Hmm.
lot of the folks who come to me with chronic complex illness, they're chronic fatigue, complex symptoms that have gone undiagnosed. Usually the answers are very apparent in that story. And this has been studied over the last couple of centuries, in
Yeah.
fact, is how close can we get to an accurate diagnosis just using the components in a person's story. So this is in the body of literature from conventional medicine as well, but there just isn't enough time in today's environment in the
Yeah.
conventional medicine to get that whole story. So that's a huge problem that I'm trying to address. So 95% of the time we get most of our answers, and then over the course of time, as we put some new sort of lifestyle interventions into practice and do some testing, we're able to figure out the rest of it. So people who are willing to show up and really work hard can generally heal in very profound ways.
Wow.
But
And
they
this
have to be
is,
able to tell that story first.
well, and that's the number one difference, obviously, because, with the average doctor being given about 7.5 to maybe maximum 15 minutes with a patient, I mean, they can't tell their health history in that time. You can't tell your story in that time. And I think this is so fitting because right now I'm actually reading a book called Narrative Medicine.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I love this whole field. And you can, medical doctors and non-medical doctors can go and get trained in narrative medicine to understand how important the healing or the story is part of their healing journey. And I love what you said as well with the fact that you can tell what's happening. You can get to that diagnosis and the plan for healing within what the patient is telling you. And that's another part where I see you're fundamentally different, because I've read some studies that show that, average doctors will diagnose a patient within 18 seconds of them walking into a room. And usually it's based
That's right. Yes, and the average the average amount of time that a patient gets to speak before they're interrupted is like 13 to 17 seconds.
wow.
before they're interrupted by the doctor. So, so there are so many impediments to getting all the components to the story out there for their
Yeah.
physician to use. So that's a huge problem.
And the way I see that what you do as well, how it could also be healing for the physician is that instead of seeing a patient 5, 10, 15, 20 times over the course of a few years and then feeling exhausted, right? Because you're just not getting anywhere in these 7.5 to 15-minute appointments, it's healing for the doctor as well to be able to sit and listen to these stories,
Absolutely.
which then you get results afterwards because like you said, the
Yeah.
answers are right there. So you can choose to spend, and have your practice be 7.5 minutes appointments, or you can consolidate everything and then really get the results that you're after, which has got to be so rewarding.
It's very rewarding. When I think about how I felt about my work when I was in a traditional setting and having to do these short encounters and how stressful that was,
Mhm.
and how bad I felt about myself as a physician and not being able to give people what they deserved and what they needed.
Mhm.
And now, I love my work. I adore my work. I feel like the luckiest person on the planet.
That is amazing. I hope for any physicians who are and health practitioners who are hearing this, please. And I think why this is so dear to my heart is that since I got into the work that I do with my clients, which, predominantly I teach the food as medicine component, which
Right.
involves the same setup that you have as well. Our
Yes.
appointments are 2.5 to 4 hours, whatever the patient needs to be able to, or my client needs to be able to go through their health history,
Mm-hmm.
which does start
Mm-hmm.
from conception onwards. Like, tell us about your
Mm-hmm.
birth, tell us about your mom and dad's relationship, tell us about, or if you didn't have a mom and dad, and you discover
Yes.
things like they were adopted or they were, all sorts of things. And you discover, I remember one client, she had had 7 abortions and she was a high functioning human, high profile human. And I think nobody would have even thought to ask a question around that, like, tell us about this, how many times were you pregnant? And this became part of her healing, was to move through that. And, and
Yes.
without judgment and without shame. And then when she was able
Right.
to, it's amazing how her healing took off, but you can't do
Yes.
that in 7.5 minutes. And
No.
the stories that I've heard from people, it's truly remarkable. And I'm sure you've heard the same, everything from the accountants that truly want to be painters and the biophysicists that truly want to be story writers and so
Yes.
on. And so once you discover their true innate calling as well in
Yes.
life, then that's also part of their
Absolutely.
healing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good for you.
Well, and
That's
it only came through. I mean, I feel fortunate to be doing this work and to be, called into this work. But what's been sad for me, and I come back to why this is so important, why I have these specific questions about how did you make that transition, is I've met so many physicians who have showed me the slits on their wrists. They have shown me or told me their stories of wanting to take their own lives, starting with like the young medical student who's just about to graduate and saying like, why did I get into this? Like, my life
yeah.
is over, but I have all this money, and I
Yeah.
went into healthcare because I wanted to care for people. And then they realize that they don't get to do that, all the way up to the retired, physician who wants to take his life for the same
Right.
reasons because he feel like he
Yeah.
wasted his entire life. Right. And it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be
Yeah.
that way for physicians
That's
at
right.
all.
Right. That's heartbreaking. Yes. Yeah. I feel so fortunate to have had my own issues and then in some ways serendipitously was ran into just the knowledge and the guidance and the mentorship that I needed at really critical times. And I
Mm.
suppose I should give myself credit for paying attention,
Yeah,
right?
100%. You do. And I think we forget that because we often say, well, it was life circumstances,
Right,
that, gave me this. Whereas what
right,
I heard from you right in the very beginning is you chose to listen. You
right,
chose to hear, you chose to explore, you chose to, say yes, as opposed to just no, no, no. I already know,
right,
I've been trained. And so therefore
right.
I know everything. So I'm really, you have to, I mean, if I was there with you, I'd give you the biggest hug, just to celebrate you, because in you doing that, you bring so many gifts to the world and to all of these patients that come your way. So
Yes,
yeah,
thank
it
you.
is remarkable.
Yeah.
So let's dive into COVID, because I do want to talk about that. Just a
Okay.
little bit, and not so much about COVID, but about this concept of resiliency and what is it, what is your opinion about all of this? And really, what do listeners need to know and understand, and what are some takeaways for them right now during this, unprecedented time in history?
Absolutely. So I think we have to first address, so the COVID pandemic is presumably about a virus. And I think we have to just briefly touch on what makes a virus virulent, what makes it a pandemic. And I think that we get a little bit lost by thinking that the virus itself is the enemy,
Right.
when in fact the true enemy is the relationship that we have with that virus. So uh, the virus can only be virulent if it lands in a hospitable host, which is us, right? And what I call a hospitable terrain, which is our health and our ability to to have an appropriate immune response, and and stay healthy even in the face of a virus that may have a very an enhanced ability to survive and thrive. So it's kind of like the virus wants to survive and thrive. We want to survive and thrive. So there's this relationship there, um, that is incredibly important. And for us to survive and thrive, we need to have resilience, this whole concept of resilience. So we need to be strong, we need to be energetic, we need to be adaptable, we need to have a powerful, appropriate immune response in the face of immunological challenges.
Mhm.
Um, and and that's something, as you and I were touching on before we started recording, is that's something that really isn't being addressed at the national level by our the leaders who are helping guide society through this pandemic. The value and the magnitude of those resilience factors in turning and shifting this pandemic in a more positive direction. And we get to that. We get our resilience through how we take care of ourselves.
Mhm.
It has to do with nutritious food, and getting good sleep, and just taking care of ourselves in all the multitude of ways that we know how to do that makes us stronger and have more energy and the capacity to be adaptable in the face of challenge. So that's really important. Um, and and um, the other thing is which I think is an important part of the equation, is the resiliency of our planet.
Mhm.
And so, we know a lot about the effects of pollution and pesticides and over consumerism and the carbon footprint and all these things that I think are making us um, less resilient, just because of the toxicity and the stresses that those things create for us. So these are the big areas that I feel like we should all be screaming from the rooftops about, right?
Yeah.
That are just way more important than in the long run than simply staying out of the path of the virus, social distancing, which
Mhm.
made sense initially given our circumstances and the overwhelm in the hospitals
Yeah.
and our care providers. We needed to do that. We needed to make that correction. But it's not sustainable, and it's not going to solve the problem. It is not going to be the reason the pandemic turns around, because we have to come out, right? We got to come out eventually. And this isn't going to be the first virus to create
No.
this kind of havoc. So we've got to figure this out. And I don't think it's rocket science.
No, I don't as well. But so anytime I'm doing these interviews and I'm, just really listening, I always also take it in as though I'm hearing it for the first time, like truly, like when you said, for example, good nutrition and proper sleep. And I'm, seeing the current state of North American health, which is really an epidemic of chronic disease. And we know that this virus does not fare well in anybody who has any respiratory health issues, anybody who's nutrient deficient, anybody who has, heart conditions. But we have right now, I mean, heart disease is, the leading killer.
Absolutely.
So is cancer, and, lung diseases are, getting up there as well. And so for the audience that, hears that, like, what do you mean better sleep? I'm already sleeping 10 hours and I'm still exhausted. What do you mean like proper nutrition? Because I already eat well. Like I eat the package of, Doritos that says it has turmeric and it's made out of whole wheat or whatever. You know what I mean? Like,
is there turmeric and is Doritos making a...
I think they're about to, if they haven't, jumped on that bandwagon,
Wow.
But I've seen turmeric honey nut Cheerios, right? That are made from whole wheat with turmeric in them. And so for a lot of people, and I've seen this in documentaries where, they've shown the mother who's got a 10-year-old obese son who's diabetic. And so the doctor says, well, he has to cut back his fat or he has to cut back his sugar. So instead of giving him the whole Costco bag of chips, she goes, well, you're only allowed to have half a bag because we're cutting back the calories. And so right now, in the context of a world where I still think, you and myself and, maybe the handful of other, health, food, nutrition, medical nutrition doctors that are out there, like, how do you explain proper nutrition to a society that I believe is nutritionally illiterate?
So really good and they have to be ready and willing to listen. I'm used to discussing these things with clients who you may not have an understanding of nutrition and the impact of good nutrition on their physiological and mental and psychological and spiritual functioning. They may not know that, but they're ready to listen. So those are the people who show up at my door. And then, it's a huge paradigm shift for them. But to speak it, so that's where my work is talking about it with individuals and helping them make the changes and work with them to create what is a huge change. And change is difficult, even if you're primed and ready for it. But it's also just beginning to teach the public about what food is and how food is, it's chemistry, and so are our bodies. And so there's a relationship, a communication that goes on between the food molecules that we ingest and who we are and how our bodies function on a biological level. That's just, and people don't realize that there's such a disconnect, right? People don't realize that what they put in their mouth becomes them.
So so can you explain that? I know a lot of our listeners probably, some of them already get that, but we get new listeners every day that are like, I had no idea. Like, I didn't know that,
right.
So can you explain how that food becomes you? Because I love that reading that on your website, that you are what you eat because it affects our genes and our DNA. But I mean, I still think that is for a lot of people. Like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Walk us through that.
So I can't say it any more simply than anything you consume, whether you're eating it, whether you're breathing it in or touching it, it's going to become you. It's going to become a part of you because those are chemical molecules that are going to have a direct interaction with the molecules of your body and thus influence the function, the structure and function of your body. So food molecules are information, every single molecule. and that information is going to get inside, and it's going to talk directly to your genes, and it's going to turn genes on and off, and it's going to modify their expression. And that those modified genetic expressions are going to lead to changes in how the cells work and how they function, which ultimately leads to everything, you know, how you're able to make energy, how you're able to detoxify the toxic environment, how you're able to think, how your brain is working, how your immune system works, how you're able to control inflammation. And so if those food molecules you're ingesting that are turning on and off your genes and becoming you are good and supportive and health promoting, that's great. You're gonna, your structure and function is going to blossom. You're going to be moving in the right direction. But if they're not, you're just you're shutting everything down, right? So you're putting a huge roadblock on your potential, right? And your potential to recover from chronic disease, your potential to prevent chronic disease, your potential to feel as vibrant and energetic and robust and resilient as you can be. So, I mean, I get really excited. I get very excited when I'm talking about this to folks, because I want them to get it. It's so profound and simple.
It is.
And it's simple. It's really simple.
I love that that you say that, because it truly is simple, and truly in a sense that, you know, even if you talk about the money, if you talk about the time, I mean, you're really just substituting the money that you're spending on certain foods for just the kinds of foods that do fuel your body and give you energy and heal you and build that resilience, and
That's
you know,
right.
that resilience against potential viruses that are here now and that will be coming in the future. You're
That's
also
right.
substituting your time for cooking in the traditional way that you've been taught how, and just switching that time and just changing the way
Right.
you're preparing foods.
Right.
So it's
Right.
not right. So it's not like you need to go out and invest in a brand new anything. It's just really substituting your time and your money
Right.
for other things.
Right.
Yeah,
And there's a learning curve. You've got to
totally.
learn, you have to learn new things. And maybe the way you're eating and some of your eating habits and some of the foods you choose to eat provide some sort of, you know, a solace, right? Or comfort, or, you know, are sort of numbing, you know,
Yeah.
in a stressful, when there's a lot of stress. And so we need to work with that, but we can work with that. We can work with all of that. So I say it's really simple, and it is a very simple sort of idea and a simple equation. It's a little more complicated putting it into practice, just
Yeah.
because there are all kinds of issues that influence our eating habits and our food choices, you know. But we can
Yeah.
do that. We're all wired for learning and
Totally.
evolving, and you
Yeah,
know.
and when we have the support of somebody like yourself, for example, who can even, you know, help provide those resources, and you take the time to even show them how to do that, then that's really when
Right.
we can see a shift on our planet, in our communities, with how
Yes.
people
Yes.
make these transitions. There's another part about what you're saying that, and it's also in the title of your book, where so your book is called Heal, a 9-stage roadmap to recover energy, reverse chronic illness, and claim the potential of a vibrant new you. So there's 3 parts about your title that I absolutely, well, actually 4 parts. I love that you have a roadmap. So the roadmap is perfect, and I want to dive into that. But the second part that I love is the recover energy, which I'm going to get to. I love the reversing chronic illness, because you actually say we can reverse chronic illness. But let's just to go off of what we were just talking about with, you know, the what you eat fuels you, becomes you, but this concept of a vibrant new you. And I love this because, you know, what I hear you saying there is that we can create a brand new you. Right? You might be in this, let's say, a 59-year-old body that you think, well, this is me because I was born this way, and this is just how, you know, my parents are overweight, my parents have heart disease, my parents died of, you know, whatever, so it's just inevitable. So can you explain the new you concept and what that
Well,
means to
yes,
people?
and you just sort of encapsulated, I think, a cultural narrative that people um, that people have in their minds that no longer stands up under the scrutiny of science, and that is this idea of genetic determinism, that our genes make us what we, and so we're destined to become what happened to our mothers and our fathers and our relatives. We know now that's not true. So there's this newer science called epigenetics that tells us that it's not the gene that determines the outcome of our health. It is the gene environment lifestyle relationship. In fact, there's so much potential to go in so many different directions that it's really the lifestyle environment part of the equation that's the most powerful. And the good news is that's within our control. A lot of that is within our control. So we absolutely can change our genetic expression through what we do. And we know a lot about what those things are. We know that even our thoughts change our genetic expression. Mm-hmm. So how we think, so being, and we know that negative, disempowering ways of thinking can increase inflammation and can shut down our ability to heal. And being calm, meditative, having positive thoughts about, let's say about stress or about what challenges us, improves our physiology and the outcome of how we face those stresses. So it's just, there's so much we've learned that just upends that old thinking about genetic determinism. Our potential is infinite, really.
I love that. And you just, as you were talking, you reminded me of a story of my mom's friend who, my mom was a nurse's aide. And so she worked in retirement homes. And one of the women she worked with, who I used to go visit all the time at the hospital where my mom worked. And, she was, in her 50s, and, she was like a plump mom, like my mom's a plump mom. And then after they retired, my mom said one day, said, "Oh, do you remember that woman that I worked with that you used to love?" And I was like, "Oh yeah." And she said, "Check out this picture." So she must have been in her 60s at this point. And she was the leanest, like, championship bodybuilder I have ever, like, and like she
awesome.
In the sparkly bikinis and the high heel stilettos, like like just like posing with the, it was incredible. And I was like, that, and did look nothing. I would never have recognized her if I walked past her in the street. But that is an example to me of, like, when you say, and you, like, you have these infinite possibilities of what you can become.
Yes.
Whether you want to become a bodybuilder or you want to become, like, we hear stories all the time of,
right,
people who've retired who become Iron, people,
right,
Ironman trainers, and so on. And, so we do have that ability.
We have that ability. And so we've got to be able to tell our story of what we aspire to, and not let any cultural narrative or input from a doctor discourage us from thinking that those things are possible. I have so many clients who come in and they've had their diagnoses for years, and their doctors have said there's nothing more that can be done, Yeah.
And that's an important part about, the subtitle of your book too, Reversing Chronic Illness, because I've had client after client who the first thing they do when I say, "Oh, hey, we can reverse this," is they break down crying. And they break down crying because they have believed what their previous doctors have told them, that they have to live with this for the rest of their life, with the pain, the medications, like surgery after surgery. And then they're told all of a sudden that that's not true. And so that's a huge part. So can you talk about that? Because with, from your perspective and experience within medicine is, were you taught that diseases could be reversed in your medical training? And what was that like to discover that?
No, we were taught that we can treat diseases, right? And typically that the treatment, it was with medications, most designed to suppress the symptoms of the disease and not really address underlying causes. which it wasn't a part of um, the disease dysfunction inquiry that I was taught in medical school. So what we know now is with this idea of epigenetics and changing gene expression through all the myriad ways that we know we can, including food. Food is so powerful. It's one of the most powerful tools that we have.
Mm-hmm.
We can shift people's entire biology. So metabolic syndrome, diabetes, and hypertension, and inflammatory disorders just melt away. And I know you've seen this, and I see it all the time. It's ordinary to me to see chronic illness completely reversed because of what people are able to do to change their genetic expression and physiology through self-care.
And that's the part, is that you're not just reversing their disease, but you are fundamentally helping these patients change their life, because now the pain is gone, the shame of the disease is gone, because a lot of people do experience that. And then they can go out there and reclaim their lives and truly be the humans, like any version of whatever human that they want to be. But when you are, carrying the weight of a chronic disease around, I mean, it's hard to express yourself as you are supposed to. And so you're giving these people truly back their lives when you do this.
Absolutely, 100%. They give their energy. They're not only are they reversing the illness, but they have a resurgence of that energy that drives everything: creative expression and connection, and the ability to just move forward in life. And that's what people want. They want to reclaim themselves and their potential. That's what and I always ask people what their goals are in working with me when they first come. That's the first thing I want to hear from them. And they often say things like that. They don't say, well, I want to reverse this, my rheumatoid arthritis and not have pain anymore. Although they'll often say that as well. It's usually, I want my life back. Mm-hmm. I want to be myself. I want to live the purpose for which I was born. I literally hear that.
Wow.
It's incredible.
Amazing. And then that brings us to the other part of your subtitle, which is, recovering energy. And this is a part where, I see this a lot, is that people get their energy back, and it's more energy than they've actually ever experienced in their entire life. And I'm sure your patients experience, because the people are walking around, again, clouded and burdened by this, brain fog and chronic fatigue and, migraines and headaches and this depression, which I think a lot of people have just come to accept. Well, this is just what it means to be human. And then all of a sudden they change their diet, they change their lifestyle. So talk more about the energy part, because there's this concept of like an esoteric, Zen energy that, you get through meditation and yoga. But then it's what we're talking about is actually like power that we create in our body. So I want you to explain that to our audience, what energy actually is.
So energy is everything that we experience as human beings that has to do with, I want to say just our life force. And it has a biological aspect, a biological component to it, which has to be in place for the rest. And when we take care of ourselves in the way our unique bodies need us to, we actually unleash the ability of those subcellular mitochondria. Those are the little powerhouse subcellular, we call them organelles. They're called mitochondria. It's where chemical energy is made. If we are providing them with the nutrients they need to make energy, and we're eliminating the sort of the toxins and irritants that are preventing energy production, suddenly these mitochondria are working at the capacity they're supposed to. And people often do experience this profound, initially physical energy, but as soon as you've got the physical energy, you get the rest of it too. Mm-hmm. You get this clearing of your thinking, the brain fog goes away, just this profound sense of feeling alive, and vibrant and curious now, because curiosity is energy, right?
Mhm.
Curious about the world around, wanting and being able to connect with other human beings. That's all about energy. Um, uh, Sexual libido, that's energy. Most of my chronically ill people, when they come, they have no libido, but that
Mhm.
returns too, because that's energy. So all these wonderful things about being a human being alive come back, or
Wow.
people experience for the very first time. You
Yeah,
know,
which is
you know
so
what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about. And and the thing is that as you're saying this too, I'm also thinking about myself during this time because, our diet hasn't really changed because we have certain values and principles around our diet and
Yes,
lifestyle. So that hasn't changed. But I have noticed my energy has gone down during this time because we have these additional stresses. We had to close down all of our businesses,
yes.
collectively lay off 85 staff,
Uh,
and that's heartbreaking. And so when you talk about the story, as I am thinking this and even saying it out loud now, I was curious for the last like 7 weeks, like, why is my energy so low? Like, I'm
yeah,
working out, I have energy to work out, I have energy to do all these things, but I also have this other story that's there around what's
right.
happening in the globe that's also, you know, causing my energy to lower. And as I think about that and what you're just saying, I'm like, oh yeah, and my libido's been down as well for like the last 7 weeks
Yeah,
because
yeah,
I have enough energy to, homeschool my kids and to figure out our business and to make sure we're eating good food and to work out. But after that, I'm kind of like, it done,
right.
And so it's this knowing that um, the energy is, it's in waves, right? Like it's not always going to be high. It's
That's
not
right.
always going to be like you could have an amazing diet, but how
Right.
important is your story and what's happening in yourself and what's happening in the world and how that's
That's
affecting you
right.
as well. And
That's right.
so, but I love this
Yes.
concept of energy. Um, so when can you share a story of a particular, case study that you've had that's probably typical of many of the case studies, just to give an idea to our listeners of what it means to have a patient come in who is, you know, just at their worst and the kind of transitions that they're able to make.
Sure. Oh gosh, I have so many. Okay, so somebody I just talked to yesterday. 5 years undiagnosed, severe fatigue, vertigo, pain, diffuse body pain. Um, what else was going on with her? I mean, what wasn't going on with her?
Yeah.
Sudden onset, like within 24 hours, this all came on. She went to her family doctor, was referred to other doctors, neurologists, etc. Nobody could figure it out. Nobody could figure it out. So she worked with a physical therapist who was very empathic and helped her somewhat with the vertigo. Somehow she was eventually referred to me. And as I kind of laughed when she told me, I know it was her physical therapist said something like, I know this doctor who I don't know what to tell you about what she does, but she she takes people like you.
Oh my God, I
Anyway,
love that.
she came to see me, and I listened to her story, which she had never been able to tell from start to finish. And it was pretty obvious to me that there was an infectious component to what was going on. And we ended up diagnosing Lyme disease and some
Mm,
co-infections. And she recovered 100% with a combination of antibiotic therapy.
mhm,
Uh, Also supported her. So we changed her nutrition and worked on her sleep, and we worked on her mindset. She had been so traumatized by these 5 years of being told there's
yeah.
nothing wrong, you know. Um, and at this point now, she has had this incredible personal just evolution of who she is. She's completely recovered from her illness. She has this beautiful abundant energy. She has this beautiful blossoming spirituality and just different, very positive way of looking at herself, looking at the world. It's such a beautiful thing to be a witness to, you know?
Yeah.
So that's
That's
one
amazing.
story.
And I think that's a great
Yeah.
story, especially because right now, I know that there's a lot of millennials that are self-diagnosing, themselves with Lyme disease because all the symptoms are aligning and
Mm-hmm.
matching up with that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
yet, and some of them do actually have Lyme disease and others
Mm-hmm.
don't. But the problem that they're experiencing is exactly what you said. They go to the doctors over and over and over and over again, and nobody's able to tell them anything. And how debilitating
Right.
is that? Like, how
Yes.
much stress does that cause in a
Absolutely.
young person's body? And they're at that age group where they're, wanting to have babies or have babies, and they're taking care of young children. But meanwhile, they have all of these symptoms. And what do you make of that right now? Like with the, and I know talking about Lyme disease is a whole, conversation in itself,
Yes, it
but
is.
yeah, but what it just, you know, as quickly
Well,
and how, what do you
yeah,
make of
I
that?
think that the resilience piece is just as important in Lyme disease as it is
Yes.
in COVID. And we don't always have to treat with antibiotics. I will if I need to. The
Right.
patient I just told you about had neurological Lyme, very dysfunctional. We had to do something fast
Yeah.
because it was very, very, very debilitating. But for a lot of folks, all we need to do is address their resilience,
Right.
their body. We need to get their nutrition and sleep and all the various aspects of self-care in place, and they often recover because Lyme's been around for a long time, and it's very ubiquitous. It's in all of our environments. And if we took 100 people off the street and tested them for Lyme, a lot of people who are completely asymptomatic will test positive.
Right.
And it's not because the test is wrong. It's because many of us have been exposed. I walk in the woods every day.
Yeah, me too.
And I know that I'm sure that I've had deer tick bites that I just didn't see. And I've never been sick. And I haven't tested myself either. But it's just there are variations in resilience that I think we need to address, and are really important to address, even if we do choose to use antibiotics to treat the Lyme.
Right.
So, and it is underdiagnosed in conventional medicine.
Yeah.
I know that from my own experience here working with folks. But I think there's some I think there's some misunderstanding about what the most appropriate way to deal with it is, and that gets into that whole resilience piece, which I think is key no matter what we're dealing with our clients.
Yeah. I love that
That makes
you,
sense.
yeah, 100%. And I think for listeners out there, I just want to repeat what Karyn said here, because of the fact that it doesn't matter what you think you have or what you've been told you have, that you have to deal with the resilience. You have to deal with building your body back up one cell at a time. I mean, technically you do it, billions of cells at a
Right.
time, but that, once you can do that, then you truly can overcome so many of these illnesses that we have been told, we're just going to have to live with. And that is absolutely does not have to be the case for you. But coming at it from the, one illness, one treatment. So whether it's Lyme's disease and antibiotics, or, diabetes and insulin, if that's the mode that you want to tackle it from, then you're not going to get that true healing, versus if you say, hey, let's just start with building up my whole entire body through all of these lifestyle changes that we can make.
Right.
So let's talk about your 9-stage roadmap. And in this book, in your book, Heal, is it similar to your new ebook that's out, which is about the stories, or are those two separate?
No, actually, the Healing Story ebook goes into one part of one of those 9 domains of healing, the roadmap that I talk about in the book, which is working with our minds and harnessing the power of the story, and taking those stories that are disempowering to us, and learning to look at them in a different way so that they're supportive and ennobling and, and help us. And stories are how the mind works, and our stories often keep us alive. They're how we impart knowledge and wisdom and how we learn. It's how the mind packages data and information, right? But we rarely have all the facts. And so we have to be able to be a little bit flexible in the way we think about things. And we can really glom on to really stories that are really make it very difficult for us to be all that we can be. And so the ebook and the chapter in the book on stories dive into what I consider to be some of the most common disempowering stories, at least within the realm of healing, that I observe in my clients and have in myself over the years as well. That we have to find a way to retell those stories, so that we're unleashed from that, from their I guess disempowerment is the word that I would use.
Can you,
Like
because
stories about our power.
yeah, that's exactly, I wanted an example.
Yeah. So these are some of the stories I hear in my consultation room often. So stories about power. So going to the doctor, the conventional doctor, the expert who tells you there's nothing wrong, and you walk away and you believe that, even though in your gut and your soul and your body, there is something wrong, but you buy that because they're the expert and you're not.
Right.
So what we need to do is reclaim the notion that we are the expert on ourselves, and that we have to be, and that we've been taught that we need to acquiesce to the expert, especially experts like doctors, priests. Yeah. So I see that very often. Also, the story of our worth. So feeling worthy for self-care, that comes up in almost everyone who walks through here. People not prioritizing their needs so that they can devote the time, attention, resources, money, etc., to take care of themselves. Because somebody else's needs are more important. The kids, the husband, the friends are more important. I hear this in women, especially, who are so great at being caretakers, which is a beautiful thing. But somehow we've gotten this incorrect idea that their needs are all more important than our own. So sleep goes, food goes, time goes, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we have to deal with that often as part of the healing process. Because if you don't prioritize yourself, no matter how gorgeous your care plan is, you're not going to be able to put any of it into practice.
Yeah, I mean, I'm listening and going, that's me. And I'm just actually kind of laughing because I can hear all my staff listening to you say this right now, and they're laughing, being like, that's Nikki. So have you, oh yeah. And I actually just started working out with a personal trainer. I actually had to hire a personal trainer, keep me accountable. And because I could easily just consult with clients and run our businesses and work, and take care of my children and work all day. And the minute somebody calls and they're sick and they're like, hey, can you book an appointment with me? I'll be like, yes, I'll drop everything. And, because I want to help them, but that doesn't help me. It's like I have not been wearing my oxygen mask for the last 16 years.
Yes.
And so it's been really showing up in my own health, despite having an amazing diet, despite having, a profound positive outlook on life. When you still don't take care of yourself, that can bring down your health as well. So, and have you been victim of that, being in a health, being in healthcare? I mean,
heck yeah. I mean, sure, I'm as much a product of the culture as anybody else, and I still catch myself with those stories. But I've
Yeah.
gotten, I'm a work in progress, but I've gotten better, and
Yeah.
I have to be super militant about what I put on my own schedule in terms of self-care.
Yeah.
It goes on, and part of that militancy is that it helps me do it. It just helps it happen, you
Yeah.
know.
That's what I
I have
found
a
as well.
strict bedtime and every morning I get up and I have my green tea and I go sit in my meditation chair and I've got my journal. I mean, so I just am really strict, and I have to be, because it's so easy to get distracted and by other things, and to place other things in a higher priority position,
Yeah,
especially when people need you, and it's hard,
totally.
especially with kids. I'm
Yeah.
better at this now that my kids are grown, but it was
Mm,
such a struggle when they were little to
yeah.
not give myself, enough time and my own attention.
Yeah. And I think you hit the nail on the head, but it really is scheduling. Like scheduling is so important, because
Mm-hmm.
without that, then you won't even think about what you need to do for yourself. And, a little story,
Right.
my husband just recently, he's like, oh my God, I think we need to schedule sex. And for years
Yeah.
I've been telling him, like, yes, if we don't schedule like date nights, and if we don't schedule like time together, I promise you, you're not getting laid, because I will go help
Yeah,
my
I
clients
know.
and my children and my business, and our financial needs will all come before that, right? Especially if my energy is
Yes.
low and I have no libido. Why would I even,
Right.
right?
Right.
So it just made me, he laughed so hard when he was like, you were right, Nikki, scheduling is so important, and it's made such a difference. And so I
We schedule what we care about, right? We schedule
100%,
what's of value.
totally 100%. And so I think that that's a lesson that, it's taken me this long to learn, but finally my husband's on board now too. So it just,
Good.
yeah. So please, all you listeners out there, get a calendar, write in it, schedule your workouts, your meditation, your journaling, your reading, your walks in nature,
Yes,
everything. And
absolutely.
even cooking and shopping for good food, like schedule that in, because it's really important to make
Absolutely.
time for it. So what are some of the other stages in your 9-stage roadmap that you'd like to
Yeah,
share
so
with our listeners?
it's 9 stages, and not everybody needs to work with all of them. It's a flexible roadmap.
Mm.
And what I'm trying to do with the book is just let people see the lay of the land. And then usually intuitively, they're going to know exactly where to jump in. They're going to just skip right to the chapter that is calling their name. But I start out with a domain that I call let go.
Mm.
And the little subtitle for that is let go to create space for healing, let go of toxins, irritants, and negative energy. So
Mm.
that's like making room in your life for your healing practices. It's letting go of the habits and time sucks and soul sucks that that get in, that are distractions, social media rabbit holes, the
Mhm.
things that we do that are real time wasters. um, and it's also about environmental toxicity and food toxicity that can be roadblocks to opening up our metabolism, so things can run smoothly biologically. So
Mhm.
I feel like that's kind of a starting place, because if we don't create that space and remove the roadblocks, we may just stay stuck.
Yeah. Yeah,
You know
that
what I
first
mean?
letting go is so important. And I love that you've created an actual diagram of this, which is really beautiful. And it's, so simply laid out that I really suggest to everybody gets the book, buy Karyn's book, and print out this page, take a photocopy of it and stick it up on your wall in your bedroom beside your computer to remind you of this. It's just important, because we need these reminders every day, right?
I do.
Yes, me too. Yes. Okay,
So
so letting
let
go of
go,
toxics.
and then there's love. Then the next section is on love, with a special emphasis on self-love,
Mm.
because the self-love is it's radical, and it's what allows us to make ourselves a priority so that we can actually implement the self-care that we
Mhm.
need and um, that we're trying to work on in our lives. Um, and then I have a chapter that's called Balance, Find Your Strong Center and Become Stress Resilient. So it's about how we all have this strong center within that we may have lost. Maybe we've never really been introduced to it, but it's something I believe we all have inside, this
Mhm.
core of who we are and what we know, what we believe, our intuition, our gut feelings. And it's also about the ability of our biology and our beings to be resilient in the face of stress, which, as we've talked about before, is a lot about all the different aspects of self-care that we tend to, but it's also about just how we were designed. When everything is working optimally, we are really designed to face stress with robust energy and success,
Mhm.
and we're designed to get better at stress as we experience it, to learn, to know what to do next time to make things better. Um, and our whole biology is geared to be stress resilient. It's
Mhm.
how we make energy in the face of challenge. So I go into that in more detail and how to support that.
Love it.
Because we tend to think where there's sort of this cultural narrative that stress is bad,
Yeah.
and stress will kill us.
Yeah.
And chronic, unrelenting stress that we don't have anything to do about is very harmful. We all know that. But really, stress is designed to get our attention. It's designed to teach us, and it's designed to support us with the energy and resources we need to face our challenges. So I try to create that little twist on how we think about stress.
I love that.
Okay.
And the research too in stress now in neuroscience is actually showing that we can have the exact same stressful moment, but it's our perception of the stress that can be
Yes.
either good for us or cause harm. So the right now with everything that we're faced with COVID, we can choose to see it as terrible, and it's really, I hate the word pandemic that they're using because it just has all these negative
I
connotations
know.
versus,
I agree.
and a lot of us feel even guilty. And I know I've checked my words often when I've said, I actually see this as a huge opportunity,
Yes.
right? It's a huge
Yes.
opportunity for ourselves, for our communities, our planet, our governments, our financial system, literally everything. And some people are like, what? I just lost my parent, they just died. But yes, that is a negative stress, but you can also change the
Yeah.
perception of death as well. So, the perception of death in
Absolutely.
itself can actually
Absolutely.
bring healing to you as opposed to adding more stress to your life.
That's right. In
Yeah.
fact, our mindset about stress, literally, as you said, same stress, two different mindsets, one looking at it as an opportunity, one looking at it as tragedy, totally different changes in our physiology.
Yeah.
And when people with a negative stress mindset are the people who often die when they're stressed,
Yeah.
or they have heart attacks because the hormones and their physiology change in a negative way that doesn't support them,
Yeah.
versus the positive stress mindset and the very positive changes in their physiology to help support them in the
Mhm.
face of that stress. So it's huge.
That's amazing. So next,
The next section is called Restore. It's about sleeping deeply, and I also touch on rest, what I call rest, pause, and play, and the importance of those. I'm just going to move through these quickly, and
yeah.
for your audience sake, and then if anything you want to ask about, you can. There's a section on movement, um, not necessarily exercise, but just how we were designed to move and the profound effects of movement on our physiology and energy. There's this whole section on food um, and nutrition and eating to support energy production. There's the whole section on the mind and stories that we talked about. a section called Flow, which is discussing the emotions and emotional wisdom and how the emotions play into healing and how to some strategies for working with them. And then a section that I call Rise, which is really about learning to be present, which I refer to as both the path as well as the prize, because being present is an attribute that's really needed for living a conscious, awake life where we're able to take care of ourselves and live fully as human beings. And my last section is on failure, the story really of failure, and how to think about it in a different way, to think about it as wisdom and direction rather than a character flaw, you know.
Right.
That's the 9 domains of healing.
I love it. And I, had the pleasure of being able to dive into your book over the last couple weeks here. And for anybody who's listening, when you get Karyn's book, don't think that you have to read it from start to end in sequential order. What you can do is literally go to the chapter that speaks to you the most. I highly recommend you go to the nourishment chapter, of course, because food is such a huge component of, it's the foundation of your health. But so are the other 8 pillars here. But I mean, I jumped right into flow because number one, I love that word, but also I'm in a place right now where I'm like, yeah, like, how do I trust my voice? How do I trust
Right.
my knowledge that I've gained? Who am I in light of other experts out there? As I'm doing my PhD, is a PhD even more valuable than, something else? For example, my grandmother's, wisdom and knowledge that she gained without ever having learned to read and write and being born in
Right.
Africa and,
Yes.
growing her own food. So I'm questioning all of these things. So as I read your book, I just jumped to the chapters that resonated with me in the moments of what I was feeling.
Good.
And what I love so much about your book. So I think this is, one of the best books that I have read that has such a comprehensive system. I love that it's 9 pillars and not just 5 pillars or 3 pillars, because really we're talking about a lifestyle change. So we have to look at the entire picture of the human body in context of our world, in context of our mind, in context of, our past, our present, and our future. And that's what your book really beautifully ties up everything in a nice, gorgeous bow. And it's also,
Thank you.
it's, even though it's tied up in a nice bow, when people go to unwrap it, I think then that's when they'll start to unravel in a beautiful way to be able to rebuild themselves in this whole new way that you talk about. And so I think it's a brilliant book, and I highly recommend
Thank you
everybody
so
gets it.
much. Thank you. And the way you recommend using it is exactly what I envisioned for people too, because people know what they need, right? And they don't need everything. They're already really good at some aspects of this. So trust your inner wisdom.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. I want to go back to just with the going back with our old stories. And here it says how our old stories slam the brakes on our healing and how we can start to rewrite them. And then one of the second points that, are in your book, it's like, how do we heal? By addressing root causes, creating resilience, resolving unmet needs. Now, when we talk about this, and I've seen this in a lot of the books on trauma, I've seen this in, Gabor Mate, he writes a lot about this, but when our conscious mind is really only responsible for, 5%, let's say, of our actions, and so much of all of our stories are unconscious, how do you resolve the discrepancy between those for people? Because so many of the stories that we tell ourselves are not necessarily even true. And so how do you work with patients when they come to you and they say, well, this is the root cause of everything? And what's that look like when sometimes, you might recognize, well, I don't know, is that the root cause, or is it something else that maybe we can't even tap into yet?
Right. And it's always a process of discovery. And so we can start with that. And I really love to honor my clients by starting where they're at and what they perceive to be those root causes of their illness. And I think it can be very helpful then to then see where the roadblocks are. Well, what's working or what's not working. We've devised this beautiful food plan. We're addressing your unmet nutritional needs. We're reinvigorating your metabolism and your energy with this food plan, but you can't stick with it. Okay, so what's going on there? What's going on that you're not able to sustain this food plan? Well, I'm stress eating. I was going along, I was doing just fine, and then such and such happened, and I just, I had the pizza and the whatever, the dessert, and then I just couldn't get back. Okay, so we need to look at that and look at what happened there. And it's not that they necessarily did anything wrong by turning to the food that gives them that immediate sense of comfort, but why couldn't you get back? Where did you get stuck? So then it's about us exploring together, right? What happened, and what do you need? What do we need to address that roadblock? And so I think that often we have to implement the strategies that we decide make sense, and then work with the roadblocks as they present themselves. And you know what I mean? So I think was that your question? Did I answer your question?
Yeah, it actually did. Or maybe I'm just going to interpret it in the way that I want to interpret it. But no, what I love about it, and again, this is what differentiates the work that you do, I think, from a lot of the other work that I see, some other people, and all work is good, right? Like we can pull what we need from all, all of these different writers and authors and practitioners and coaches. But what I love about this is that, the example that you just gave, it's, even though we're uncovering our old stories and our old patterns and our old habits, you're also looking at what's happening in the moment. And let's just talk about what's happening in the moment, as opposed to necessarily hanging on to a story. Because I know a lot of my clients will come to me and they say, well, so-and-so said that if I was abused, then that is the reason for my whatever. And what I've come to find is that actually it's the story they're telling themselves about their story, which is actually causing almost more stress. And actually it's just about recognizing, well, what does happen in the moment? When you reach for the chocolate bar, when you reach for the pizza, and, did you want comfort? What could you have gotten comfort in another way, through a hug? Or did you want to just call your mom who you haven't talked to? Or did you,
right.
And then once they recognize that there's other tools available to get comfort or love or security or fun or excitement or whatever the emotion is, then it puts them more in an empowering place to recognize the next time when they're in that situation, there is another tool available beyond the pizza.
And sometimes there are uncomfortable emotions that arise that are not okay, that we've taken on a story that certain emotions aren't okay for us to feel. It's not okay for us to be angry, at so-and-so, or it's not okay for us to feel afraid. Or to feel jealous, or to feel any of what we refer to as the negative emotions. And so I think sometimes we want to put a bottle on those. We want to stick those in a bottle. We want to put those away and not embrace those as our own. And that can often be a roadblock to healing, because we use food very often to assuage our feelings about ourselves, shame, or as you were talking about, past trauma. Because once we allow ourselves to feel, then we have to take responsibility for those feelings and what to what to do about them.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard. It can be hard.
It's a journey.
Yeah,
Journey.
it's a
And it's
journey.
so nice that it's to know that people can have you walking alongside them and supporting them through that journey, because I think we all do. Like you mentioned very early on in the podcast that, you know, you had mentors who helped get you to this place, and we all need mentors. We all need,
Yes.
you know, to be an apprentice to someone who has more experience than we do and who has, you know, walked ahead of us. And so I think that that is, you know, the world needs more of that. And I can see that that is the role that you play with your medical degree and your white coat, is that, you know, you're out there supporting people as a mentor, as a role model as well. And also with these tools and giving them the tool, these 9 tools and many others that they can use to support them through their healing journey, which is, we need more people like you. I want to clone you right now. There's just one of you in every city. So,
and you too. And you too. There are a
oh,
lot of folks, there's a growing number of people who get that this expanded model of healing that we're talking about. And they're in, you know, they're physicians and nutritionists and health coaches, and it's growing. It's really great to see.
yeah,
So there are resources available for everybody in just about every city, and a lot of folks are doing, you know, they're doing virtual consults as well. So
is that what you've been
there's
doing?
somebody to walk that. Oh, it's been all virtual since the middle of March.
Yeah,
And then I have a lot of people who travel to see me. So I'd like them to come for their first visit and see me in person,
yeah.
but then we do it virtually for follow-up
After that,
visits. Yeah.
that is
Mhm.
amazing. That is amazing. So, to wrap up here, what is, you know, if you could have any dream, any wish, any, you know, anything for anyone right now, what is it that you want people to really leave with knowing, as we wrap up this podcast? First of all, how can they get in contact with you and how do they work with you? Let's start with that and then we'll dive into your
They
wish.
can visit my website, KarynShanksMD.com. It's Karyn with a Y, Karyn, KarynShanksMD.com. And there's information about my practice there. There are ebooks available and lots of articles. So yeah, that's the best way to get to know what I'm about and how to work with me. My wish, oh gosh, do I have to narrow it down to one?
No, you can do as many as you want. It's my podcast. We can talk for 7 hours if we want.
I wish people, okay, so we could talk about many things, but what I really would wish for people right now is to sort of let go of their fear and just trust what they know in their hearts. I want people to reconnect to what they know, you know, and when they hear things that don't sound right, to trust that inner instinct and that inner guidance and get curious and explore it. And I think you know that what I'm referring to right now is that people in their fear are really glomming onto some simplistic ideas about where we are meant to go next. And nobody's talking about resilience at the top. And so I want people to, I don't want to say not trust the dominant narratives that they're hearing, but just question, be curious, ask questions, and listen to your inner guidance. It's there.
Yeah, that is,
You know what I mean?
oh, I know what you mean. Yeah. Yeah. And that is a, you know, I think one of the greatest wishes that we could have for, you know, really everybody on the planet is where we can feel so connected to ourselves and so connected to our environment that we can actually trust, our innate knowledge, because we are a
Yes.
part of nature. And once
Yes.
we can listen to that, like a tree listens for the seasons and knows what it needs to do to protect itself against the winter and protect itself against the sun and the drought
Right.
that's coming, right? That we as humans, we have the ability, the innate ability to also be in rhythm and in sync with all of that, which means that we can also be in rhythm and sync with our own intuition around what's happening globally right now
Yes.
around this pandemic.
Absolutely.
And there are going to be a lot of things coming down the pipeline that are going to really test our strength and our resolve and
Yes.
our innate understanding of who we are as biological, species
Yes.
on this planet. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and I think that collectively we do have to get there, because I think we have governments that are making decisions for what is best for us. Meanwhile,
Yes.
if we don't
Yeah.
um, address what we actually innately know to be true, then a lot of people will suffer at the
I think you're
recommendations
right.
coming and happening. So
Right.
yeah, it's
The recommendations and the lack of recommendations, that
exactly.
imbalance. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, and
Right.
starting with your book is a really great way to strengthen that gut, heart, brain instinct. And it's because once you do turn to food and you see the power of food to generate that energy in your body, the power of the food to heal you and to create that resilience, coupled with the letting go, the love, the balance, the restoration, the movement, discovering flow, and rising up, once you do that, then you will strengthen your ability to truly trust yourself,
I
and you'll be
agree.
able to, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, that's a beautiful wish that you have
Absolutely.
for the world. That is, and it, and it's going to take a tribe and a village to help support
I
people
know.
as they journey through this, right? And
Exactly.
so, yeah, reach out to other people who are also on the same path of healing, that you've laid out in your book and that we've talked about today as well. So surround yourself with those people. And
Yep.
yeah, I see that we can rise up collectively as a nation, as a planet, as a species, and, and then as individuals as well.
Absolutely. And the other thing that comes to mind is just softening, because I think when we're afraid, we get fixed in our thinking. We get we get dogmatic about what's right and what's wrong and who's doing the right thing and who's not doing the right thing. And I think we just need to, we just need to soften that
Mm.
and realize that everybody's doing their best, you
Yeah,
know, and there are going to be differences in opinion
yeah.
about what it is that we need to do. But just soften that and soften yourself and do whatever is that you require. Give yourself permission in your life to just uh, to to let some things go, to relax, and to just trust.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah. And as you said that, I took the
and
biggest, deepest breath and
I
let it
know.
go. It's like, yes. Yeah. That is a beautiful way to wrap this up. If those are the only two things that people get out of this, whole entire show today, then let that be it. Because I think those two, wishes that you have for people are enough to really support people moving forward in the healthiest of ways. So I want to thank you so much, Karyn, for being on our show. It has been a pleasure having you. I want to have you back again because there's so many
Great.
more
I want to
pieces that
come
I'm
back.
amazing. Yeah, lots to
I've enjoyed
discuss.
it. Yeah, I'd love to come back.
Okay. So
Yeah.
I'm wishing you all the best in your journey, just on your own and with your patients as well and with your family. And yeah, I look forward to the next time we're together. Have the most amazing of days.
Thank you. You too.
Okay. So, how did you enjoy that show? Did you fall in love with Karyn like I did? Are you in just awe of the beauty of this woman and the knowledge that she has and the conviction that she has to live by her values, her principles, her knowledge? I love how she ended the show with saying that, we need to trust our knowledge, trust our gut, trust our instincts, especially around everything that is going to be unfolding as a result of COVID. It's so important that we tap into that now more than ever. I love the knowledge that she shared, the tip that we just need to, stop, slow down. And it's so important. I think a lot of us, even though we've been home for 7, 8 weeks now, not a lot of us, I think, have actually slowed down. In fact, I think that people have ramped up things, whether it's, dreaming and studying and learning and making TikTok videos and, trying to reimagine the world ahead, and what that's going to look like, that new normal, what will that be like? But, have you really taken the time to just pause, to slow down, to really think about your narrative, to think about your story, your past, think about it in the context of your present day life, and think about it really in a very slow, methodical, self-compassionate and loving way, what your future could look like moving forward. So, you know what to do, folks. Share this show with your friends, with your loved ones. Let them know that it exists, because there are gold nuggets that come out of every interview that I do with our guests, our healing hero stories, our medical doctors, and other healthcare practitioners out there. And those gold nuggets can actually save someone's life. They really, really can. Just a little bit of information can go a long way. And, with Karyn's 9 steps to turning your health around, getting more energy, reversing chronic disease, even just one of those steps shared with somebody else, if they actually slow down, take the time to learn about it in detail, and then go and implement what Karyn is saying, is enough to change your life and make it better. And who wouldn't want that for your loved one, for your neighbor, for your friend, for an old colleague, or somebody that you're working with now? You have the power, through simply just sharing information, to change someone's life. So thanks everyone for being here with me. Stay healthy and well. And as certain communities around the world start to open up right now, just remember that just because the world is opening up slowly doesn't mean that you need to jump in quickly to do it. If you are enjoying your self-isolation and social distancing, complete the projects that you've started. Don't think that you just need to jump into, what the world is doing. I've already heard of, people planning concerts and big get-togethers and all of that, but you actually can stop and really think about how you want to move forward in your life. If friends start to ask you over for dinner, you can actually stop and say, do I want to have dinner with these people? Actually, are these people the friends that I want to be sharing my precious, amazing time with? Maybe you've met friends online during COVID that you've connected with. And maybe you don't want to jump into your old routine, old habits, old dinner dates, old, anything, events that you've been attending. And maybe you just want to create a whole new life for yourself based on what you've learned by stopping and slowing down during COVID. So yes, if you are opening up and stepping out, and you're going to be gathering in small groups, like our government in British Columbia is saying that we can, groups of 2 to 6, choose those 2 to 6 people really wisely, because every time you choose to exchange a moment of your life, your time with somebody, it is an energy exchange. And so really have that energy exchange leaving you in a positive, fulfilled way. And you are also leaving the people that you are with in a positive and fulfilled way, as opposed to having your cup drained. And you know what I'm talking about. We all have people in our world, in our life, in our families, amongst our friends, that tend to drain our cups and don't tend to fill them up. So as you expose yourself to the world, just think about what relationships you want to engage in as you move forward. And that is the tip that I leave you with today. Stay tuned and join us next week for another episode of the Eat Real to Heal show. It has been a pleasure serving you with knowledge and information. Go out there and do the same for others. Bye for now.